The jar. That year was also a good year for olive trees. The massif trees, laden with fruit the previous year, had all rebounded, despite the fog that had prevented them from blossoming. Zirafa, who had a good supply of them on his farm in Primosol, foreseeing that the 5 old enameled earthenware jars he had in the cellar would not be enough to contain all the oil from the new harvest, had promptly ordered a 6th, more capacious one in Santo Stefano di Camastra, where they were manufactured, chest-high, beautifully pot-bellied and majestic. It was to be the abbess of the other 5. Needless to say, he'd also argued with the bricklayer over there about this jar. And who didn't Don Lollo Zirafa pick on? For the slightest thing, even a pebble falling from the surrounding wall, even a straw, he'd shout for them to saddle his mule so he could rush to town to file the documents. So, with all the stamped papers and lawyers' fees, suing this one, that one, and always paying everyone's expenses, he'd almost ruined himself. They said that his legal advisor, tired of seeing him appear before him 2 or 3 times a week, to get rid of him, had given him a little book like those used in Mass, the Code, because he should run away and seek for himself the legal basis for the disputes he wanted to bring. Before, everyone he had to argue with would shout at him, to make fun of him, saddle the mule. Now, instead, consult the notebook. And Don Lollo replied, "Sure, and I'll shoot you all dead, you sons of bitches." That new jar, paid for at a solid 4 ounces, was temporarily placed in the winery while awaiting a place in the cellar. A jar like it had never been seen before. Placed in that cavern stinking of must and the acrid, raw odor that lingers in airless and lightless places, it was pitiful. The olive harvest had begun 2 days earlier, and Don Lollo was furious because, between the olive harvesters and the muleteers who had come with their mules loaded with manure to be deposited in piles on the hillside for the new season's bean harvest, he no longer knew how to divide up, who to look after first. And he cursed like a Turk and threatened to strike down this one and that one if even one olive, no matter how small, were missing, as if he had first counted them all, one by one, on the trees, or if each pile of manure wasn't the same size as the others. Wearing a white hat, in shirt-sleeves, his chest peeling, his face flushed and dripping with sweat, he ran here and there, rolling his wolfish eyes and angrily rubbing his shaved cheeks, on which his overbearing beard was almost reappearing under the scrape of the razor. Now, at the end of the 3rd day, 3 of the peasants who had been harvesting, entering the winepress to place the ladders and the canes, were left at the side of the beautiful new jar, split in 2, as if someone, with a clean cut, taking in the entire width of the belly, had detached the entire front flap. Look, look! Who could it have been? Oh my goodness, and who's going to hear Don Lollo now? The new jar, what a shame! The first, more frightened than all the others, suggested that they immediately close the door and leave quietly, leaving the ladders and canes outside, leaning against the wall. But the second, "Are you crazy? With Don Lollo? He'd think we broke it for him. Everyone, stop right there." He went out in front of the winepress and, using his hands as a spokesperson, called out, "Don Lollo! Ah, Don Lollo!" There he was, down by the hillside with the fertilizer workers. He was gesticulating furiously as usual, occasionally tugging his white hat back with both hands. Sometimes, with all that tugging, he was unable to tear it from his neck or forehead. The last flames of dusk were already fading in the sky, and amid the peace descending on the countryside with the evening shadows and the sweet coolness, the gestures of that perpetually furious man were unleashing themselves. Don Lollo! Ah, Don Lollo! When he came up and saw the carnage, he seemed to be going mad. He attacked the 3 first, he grabbed one by the throat and hanged him from the wall, shouting, "Blood of the Madonna, you will pay for this." Grabbed in turn by the other 2, with their earthy and bestial faces distorted, he turned the furious rage, he banged his hat on the ground, beat his cheeks, stamped his feet and shouted like someone mourning a dead relative. The new jar, 4 ounces of jar, not yet filled. He wanted to know who had broken it. Could it have broken on its own? Someone must have broken it, out of spite or envy. But when? But how? There was no sign of violence. Could it have arrived broken from the factory? What? It rang like a bell. As soon as the peasants saw that his first fury had subsided, they began urging him to calm down. The jar could be fixed. It wasn't badly broken, just one piece. A good tinker would put it back together, new. Uncle Dima Likazi was right there. He had discovered a miraculous putty, the secret of which he jealously guarded, a putty that not even a hammer could do once it had set. Look, if Don Lollo wanted, tomorrow, at dawn, Uncle Dima Likazi would come there and, in a jiffy, the jar would be better than before. Don Lollo said no to those exhortations, that it was all useless, that there was no longer any remedy, but in the end he let himself be persuaded, and the next day, at dawn, punctual, Uncle Dima Likazi showed up at Primosol with the toolbox on his back. He was a crooked old man, with twisted and knotted joints, like an ancient Saracen olive tree trunk. To get a word out of him, you needed a hook. Nutria, or sadness rooted in his deformed body, or even distrust that no one could understand and properly appreciate his merit as an inventor, not yet certified. He wanted facts to speak for themselves, Uncle Dima Likazi. He then had to look both front and back, so that his secret wouldn't be stolen. "Let me see this putty," Don Lolo said to him first, after looking at him for a long time, with suspicion. Uncle Dima shook his head, full of dignity. "It shows at work. But will it be okay?" Uncle Dima set the basket on the ground. He took out a large, worn, and rolled-up red cotton handkerchief. He began to unfold it slowly, amidst everyone's attention and curiosity, and when finally a pair of spectacles with broken saddles and arms tied with string emerged, he sighed and the others laughed. Uncle Dima didn't care. He wiped his fingers before taking the spectacles. He put them on. Then he began to examine very gravely the jar he had brought from the threshing floor. He said, "It will be fine. But with just the mastic," Zirafa agreed. "I don't trust it. I want stitches too." "I'm going," Uncle Dima replied immediately, standing up and putting the basket back on his shoulders. Don Lolo grabbed him by the arm. "Where, sir and pig, treated like this? Look at that Charlemagne air. Wretched slaughterer and piece of donkey, I have to put oil in there, and the oil oozes. A mile-long crack, with just putty? I want stitches. Putty and stitches. I'm in charge." Uncle Dima closed his eyes, pursed his lips, and shook his head. Everyone was like that. He was being denied the pleasure of doing a clean, conscientiously executed job, and of proving the virtues of his putty. "If the jar," he said, "does not ring like a bell again—" "I don't hear anything," Don Lolo interrupted. "The stitches. I'll pay for the putty and the stitches. How much do I have to give you?" "If only with mastic." "Damn, what a fool!" Zirafa exclaimed. "What am I talking about? I told you I want stitches. We'll figure it out when the job's done. I don't have time to waste with you." And he went off to tend his men. Uncle Dima set to work, swollen with anger and spite. And his anger and spite grew with every hole he drilled in the jar and in the detached edge to pass the sewing wire through. He accompanied the whirring of the arrow with increasingly frequent and loud grunts, and his face grew greener with bile and his eyes sharper and brighter with anger. Having finished that first operation, he angrily hurled the drill into the basket. He attached the detached edge to the jar to test whether the holes were evenly spaced and aligned. Then with the pliers he cut the wire into as many pieces as there were stitches he needed to make, and called for help from one of the farmers harvesting the olives. "Courage, Uncle Dima," he said to him, seeing his upset face. Uncle Dima raised his hand in an angry gesture. He opened the tin box containing the mastic and held it up to the sky, shaking it, as if to offer it to God, since the men refused to acknowledge its virtue. Then he began to spread it with his finger all over the detached edge and along the crack. He took the pincers and the pieces of wire he had prepared beforehand and stuck it into the open belly of the jar, ordering the farmer to attach the edge to the jar, just as he had done earlier. Before starting to award the points, "Pull," he said to the farmer from inside the jar. "Pull with all your might. See if it comes off again? Woe to those who don't believe. Knock, knock. Does it ring like a bell, even with me inside? Go tell your master." "He who's on top commands, Uncle Dima," sighed the farmer, "and he who's on the bottom gets damned. Give the points, give the points." And Uncle Dima began threading each piece of wire through the two adjacent holes, one on either side of the weld, and with the pliers he twisted the two ends. It took him an hour to thread them all. The sweat poured down into the jar. As he worked, he complained about his bad luck. And the farmer, outside, comforted him. "Now help me get out of this," Uncle Dima said finally. But as broad as his belly was, that jar was as narrow in the neck. Uncle Dima, in his rage, hadn't noticed. Now, after trying and trying, he couldn't find a way out. And the farmer, instead of helping him, there he was, writhing with laughter. Trapped there, in the jar he himself had mended, and which now, there was no middle ground, had to be broken again, forever, to get him out. Don Lolo joined in the laughter and shouts. Uncle Dima, inside the jar, was like a furious cat. "Let me out," he screamed. "By God, I want to get out. Now, help me." Don Lolo was at first stunned. He couldn't believe it. But how? In there? Was it sewn in there? He approached the jar and shouted to the old man. "Help? And what help can I give you? You stupid old man, what? Shouldn't you have taken the measurements first? Come on, try. One arm out. Like this. And the head. Up. No, slowly. What? Down. Wait, not like this. Down, down. But how did you do it? And the jar, now? Calm down, calm down." He began to recommend all around, as if the others were about to lose their composure and not him. "My head's smoking. Calm down. This is a new case. The mule." He rapped the jar with his knuckles. It really rang like a bell. "Beautiful, restored to its former glory. Wait," he said to the prisoner. "Go saddle my mule," he ordered the peasant, and, scratching his forehead with both fingers, he continued to say to himself, "Look what's happening to me. This isn't a jar, this is the devil's device. Stop right there. and he rushed to hold the jar, in which Uncle Dima, furious, was struggling like a trapped beast. "New case, my dear, that the lawyer has to resolve. I don't trust him. The mule, I'll go and come back, be patient. In your best interest. Meanwhile, easy, calm down, I'll look after my own. And first of all, to safeguard my rights, I'll do my duty. Here, I'll pay you for your work, I'll pay you for the day. 5 lira. Is that enough for you?" "I don't want anything," shouted Uncle Dima. "I want to go out." "You'll go out, but in the meantime, I'll pay you. Here, 5 lira. He took them out of his waistcoat pocket and threw them into the jar. Then he asked solicitously, "Have you had breakfast? Bread and side dishes, come on, bite. You don't want any? Throw it to the dogs. It's enough for me that I gave it to you." He ordered it to be given to him. He mounted his horse and galloped off through the city. Anyone who saw him thought he was going to commit himself to the asylum, given his gesticulating so much and in such a strange way. Luckily, he didn't have to wait in the lawyer's office, but he did have to wait quite a while before the lawyer stopped laughing after he'd explained the case. He got annoyed by the laughter. "What's so funny, excuse me? It doesn't burn, your lordship. The jar is mine." But he kept laughing and wanted him to retell the story, just how it had happened, so we could have more laughs. Inside, huh? Had he sewn himself up? And what did Don Lolo expect? "You, keep it in there, ha ha ha. Oh dear, keep it in there so we don't lose the jar?" "Do I have to lose it?" Zirafa asked with clenched fists. "The damage and the shame?" "But do you know what this is called?" The lawyer finally told him. "It's called kidnapping." "Kidnapping? And who kidnapped him?" Zirafa exclaimed. "He kidnapped himself. What fault is it of mine?" The lawyer then explained that there were two possibilities. On the one hand, he, Don Lolo, had to immediately release the prisoner or face charges of kidnapping. On the other, the tinkerer had to answer for the damage he caused through his inexperience or his foolishness. "Ah," Zirafa breathed, "by paying me for the jar." "Easy," the lawyer observed, "not as if it were new, mind you." "And why?" "But why was it broken, oh beautiful?" "Broken? No, sir. It's healthy now. Better than healthy, he says so himself. And if I break it again now, I'll never be able to fix it again. Lost jar, sir." The lawyer assured him that this would be taken into account and that he would be charged what it was worth in its current state. Rather, he advised him, have him evaluated first. "I kiss your hands," said Don Lolo, running away. When he returned, toward evening, he found all the farmers celebrating around the inhabited jar. Even the guard dog joined in the celebration, jumping and barking. Not only had Uncle Dima calmed down, but he too had begun to enjoy his bizarre adventure and was laughing about it with the wicked gaiety of the sad. Zirafa pushed everyone aside and leaned over to look inside the jar. "Ah, are you okay with it?" "Great. In the cool," he replied. "Better than at my house." "Nice to meet you. First of all, I should warn you that this jar cost me 4 ounces, new. How much do you think it'll cost now?" "With me in here?" asked Uncle Dima. The peasants laughed. "Silence," shouted Zirafa. "One of two things, either your mastic is good for something, or it's good for nothing. If it's good for nothing, you're a cheat. If it's good for something, the jar, as it is, must have its price." "What price? You estimate it." Uncle Dima thought for a while, then said, "I answer. If you had had it treated with mastic alone, as I wanted, first of all, I wouldn't be in here, and the jar would be worth more or less the same as before. So disfigured with these snafus, which I had to force to give you from here, what price could it command? A third of what it was worth, maybe." "A third?" asked Zirafa. 1 ounce and 33? "Less yes, more no." "Well," said Don Lolo, "pass on your word, and give me 1 ounce and 33. "What?" said Uncle Dima, as if he hadn't understood. "I'll break the jar to let you out," replied Don Lolo, "and you," says the lawyer, "pay me what you valued it at, 1 ounce and 33. "Me, pay?" sneered Uncle Dima. "Your Grace is joking. I'm crawling in here." And, taking the tari pipe out of his pocket with some difficulty, he lit it and began to smoke, expelling the smoke through the neck of the jar. Don Lolo was shocked. Neither he nor the lawyer had foreseen this other eventuality, that Uncle Dima would no longer come out of the jar. And how could it be resolved now? He was on the verge of ordering again, the mule. But he realized it was already evening. "Oh, really?" he said. "You want to live in my jar? Let everyone here bear witness. He doesn't want to leave, so as not to pay for it, I'm ready to break it. Meanwhile, since he wants to stay there, tomorrow I'll sue him for illegal lodging and for preventing me from using the jar." Uncle Dima first took another puff of smoke, then replied placidly, "No, sir, I don't want to hinder you. Am I here to please you? Let me out, and I'll gladly go. Pay, not even jokingly, your lordship." Don Lolo, in a fit of rage, raised his foot to kick the jar, but he held back. Instead, he grabbed it with both hands and shook it all over, trembling. "See that putty?" Uncle Dima told him. "You prison piece," Zirafa roared then. "Who did the wrong, me or you? And I have to pay for it? You're starving in there, we'll see who wins." And he left, forgetting the 5 lira he'd tossed into the jar that morning. With him, Uncle Dima planned to start off with a party that evening with the peasants who, having stayed up late because of that strange accident, were staying out to spend the night in the countryside, out in the open, on the threshing floor. One of them went shopping at a nearby tavern. Just in time, the moon was shining, making it look like it had changed color. At a certain hour, Don Lolo, having gone to bed, was awakened by a hellish din. He looked out onto a balcony of the farmhouse and saw, out on the farmyard, under the moonlight, a multitude of devils, drunken peasants, holding hands, dancing around the jar. Uncle Dima, inside, was singing at the top of his lungs. This time, Don Lolo couldn't hold back any longer. He charged like a raging bull and, before they had time to stop him, with a push he sent the jar rolling down the hillside. Rolling, accompanied by the laughter of the drunken men, the jar smashed against an olive tree. And Uncle Dima won.